I got on Reddit about a year ago and started doing some searches on Sasquatch encounters, and I came across a Reddit or a subreddit. I don't understand Reddit at all. And by the way, I would not recommend children go to Reddit. It's a wide open website where anything goes, and that's the case for this Reddit. But I love this Reddit. I love this guy's page, and because he writes some of the best stories that I have ever read on the internet. And the name of the Reddit is called SasquatchAttacks. It is hosted or moderated by a guy named Budrock56. And I'm going to read, he gave me permission to read some of his stories online about 3 months ago, and I haven't done any, namely because a lot of them are, they're extra R-rated, and I just can't do it on this channel. But this is a fun story, and if you don't like fun stories, you can click away now. But if you do, you're going to miss a really good story. This is a Quentin Tarantino type story, and I think you're going to like it. So hang in there. This is great. I love reading it. All right, here we go. Story from Reddit, SasquatchAttacks. A link is in the description below to this story. I encourage you to go read all his stuff if you've got the stomach for it. But this one is not necessarily that R-rated. The header for the Reddit is, "We are a pro-kill Bigfoot hunting group. We are all things Sasquatch that you need. SasquatchAttacks is the abusive relationship of the Bigfoot community." Posted 6 months ago by Budrock56, Sasquatch expert and senior researcher. Bud's Bigfoot case file number 302, The Face in the Window. About an hour south of my residence, there was a recent sighting. A middle-aged husband and wife live in a mobile home on about 10 acres of land out in the country. About 50 yards directly behind their home is a cypress swamp that stays filled with water year-long, save for the times of drought. The best I can tell, the swamp and the woods go on back a long way, perhaps several hundred acres. My client's property line ends at the swamp. I don't know the owner of the swamp and the woodlands, but the paint on the trees tells me that it's marked for timber harvest. The report goes like this. The husband and wife were in their living room about 10 p.m. on a weeknight watching TV. There was scratching on the side of the house as if someone or something was dragging its claws along the side of the house. It was loud enough to cause concern. It was also way out of place as the couple lives a half a mile away from their nearest neighbor. The husband fetched his 12-gauge shotgun, loaded it, and went outside to investigate while the woman stayed in the house. The husband walked all the way around the house, but he didn't see anything, so he went back inside. No more than 10 minutes after the husband went inside and both he and his wife settled back in their living room, there was a loud bang on the side of their house outside the kitchen. The wife and husband both jumped up immediately, startled by the loud sound. The husband grabbed a still-loaded shotgun and angrily went back outside to investigate. At this point, their mindset was that someone was outside their house messing with them. The wife again stayed inside the house. After a moment, she decided she wanted to look out the living room window to see if she could see anything. The living room lights were on, as was their television. Therefore, there was a substantial reflection on the window that prevented her from clearly seeing out. Instead of turning off the lights, the wife decided to move closer to the window, almost putting her nose against the glass. As she tried to see out the window, she noticed something strange. It was like something was covering up the window from the outside. Her first thought that maybe it was a black trash bag that had blown up against the window, preventing her from seeing out. She then leaned in closer and she squinted her eyes. Suddenly, what was blocking the living room window moved. In fact, it turned sideways from right to left, and there it was, a Sasquatch face staring right at her, only inches away from her face. Apparently, the creature was already standing at the window, but its head was turned toward the back of the trailer, presumably because it heard the husband approaching. When the wife tried looking through the window, the view was obscured by the left side of its head. Then it turned, and suddenly she was face to face with the horror outside of her home. The wife screamed. The creature reportedly remained for a moment looking at her, and then it left. The wife described the face as resembling a large black gorilla with a terrifying grimace. When the husband heard his wife scream, he ran back to the front door and entered his home. He found his wife staring at the window with her hands clasped over her face. She was in shock. It took several moments for her husband to get anything out of her about what she had seen. After a little bit, the woman told her husband what had happened and what she saw. The woman never calmed down, though. The man decided to drive her to the emergency room at the nearest hospital. There, she was treated for acute hypertension and told to follow up with her regular doctor. The shock was so terrible it had apparently caused her blood pressure to spike. The wife didn't want to go right back home at that time, so they got a hotel room that night. In fact, the wife refused to go home for a while. She stayed with her sister, who lived a half hour away, for the whole week. The husband, however, returned home and stayed there for that week. Aside from some strange nighttime vocalizations, nothing of any significance occurred. The wife finally returned home. She was still somewhat fearful, but had also started second-guessing her sighting and perception of what she saw. They settled in and have not had any encounters since that night. They do report to sometimes hearing odd animal sounds out in the swamp, but they admit that their encounter had changed their perspectives, and they are now much more cognizant of their surroundings. I was referred to the clients by a common acquaintance. The foregoing account is based upon information I collected from them. In addition, I was allowed to examine their property, including the mobile home. The clients had no authority to grant me access onto the swampland, as they do not hold the title to said land. I entered the swampland anyway, doing an initial survey. It was a typical cypress swamp. Roughly 50% of the surface area is covered in dark water. The canopy was very thick. I decided to forego any deep sojourn without my snake boots and being armed. I thanked the clients for sharing their story, and I told them I would like to come back for a night of investigation. They both agreed to allow me access to their land the following night. They reiterated that they cannot give me access to the adjoining swampland since they did not own the property. Sunset the following night was at 8:46 p.m. I arrived at the client's homestead at approximately 8:30 p.m. As I was getting ready for my night investigation, the husband came out to meet me in his driveway. I immediately noticed a curious change in his attitude. He asked me what I was planning to do with all this gear I had. I was outfitted with my usual gear for a Sasquatch hunt: an AR-10 rifle, my primary killing piece for Bigfoot, a 12-gauge pump shotgun with high-capacity magazine loaded with high-velocity 1-ounce slugs, a 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun for snakes, my .480 Ruger revolver in my shoulder rig, a Glock M40 10mm pistol and a paddle holster on my right hip, and a Colt Delta Elite 10mm 1911 pistol in my paddle holster on my left hip, a Smith 686 357 Magnum revolver in a holster on my gun belt, which was on my waist, a couple of fixed-blade tactical knives, and a machete hanging from my belt, a few improvised munitions and homemade grenades hanging from the front of my camo tactical vest, a tack hat with a mosquito netting, night vision glasses on my head, painted face, full camo clothing, tactical operator gloves, snake boots, and a steel chainsaw painted jungle camo on a sling over my shoulder for sawing up Sasquatch corpses for transport. I can only assume that the client's striking change of attitude was the result of the federal government interjecting their agents into this matter. I began interrogating the client about this prospect and advising him of the dangers posed by the government agents. The client resisted my interrogation. This seemed to confirm my concern. The MIB had already gotten to him. About that time, my hunting partner, Johnny McMurder, pulled up in his F-250. The client wanted to know who he was, so I told him. I then briefed him on what was going to take place tonight as Mac prepped himself. The client then became unruly. Mac noticed the commotion and came to my side. The fact that he was carrying a Barrett 50 BMG seemed to further upset the client. I informed Mac that the client is in cahoots with the federal government. The client protested my assertion. The client then ordered us off his property and threatened to contact local law enforcement. Eventually, I agreed to terminate my arrangement with the client. I told him that he would still be billed for my services. This was not greeted well. However, Mac reinforced my statement by shooting a 1-inch hole through the block of our former client's engine block with a 50 BMG. The man again protested us being on his property. I informed him that we were leaving his property and entering the swamp behind his house. Mac and I parked our truck across the road and cut around the former client's property to access the swamp. Our hunt was now underway. We walked approximately 2.2 miles into the swamp, following a more or less straight line. We traveled slowly using a stop-and-go approach and spread out approximately 50 meters from each other. We heard nothing and encountered no sign. At 1:30 a.m. we began Plan B, which consisted of an onslaught of calls and other methods to attract a Sasquatch. This tactic ended at approximately 3:30 a.m. without positive results. At this point, McMurder and I consulted. We reached two possible conclusions. First, the former client's encounter with the beast frightened it off. In other words, once the monster saw the woman looking at it, it knew it had been made. Therefore, for self-preservation, it left the area, either permanently or temporarily. Another possibility was that the beast was just laying low. If this is the case, then the beast was still out there. Knowing that we would realize no success in the first instance, we decided to use the remainder of the night trying to flush out the animal, assuming that the animal was still there but was lying low. Mac and I devised the following plan. I would immediately return to the former client's property. Mac would wait at the current location. At a prearranged time, Mac would start moving forward towards my position, during which he would begin triggering his incendiary devices and starting a wildfire. The goal, of course, is to drive the animal out of the swamp into the open where I would be waiting in ambush to effect a kill shot. Because of the thick forest and swamp, we felt that the animal, if still present, would be bottlenecked onto the property of the former clients in its escape from the flames. Due to recent drought conditions, the trees and brush sparked like a box of gas-soaked matches. The wildfire raged fast and hot. I had set up under the former client's mobile home with my rifle pointed toward the swamp and ready to fire. I heard and smelled the wildfire before I saw it. At first, it appeared as lights through the trees. Then, after just a few minutes, it was a hellish inferno. It was also headed toward my position. I waited as long as I could before falling back to a safer spot. Finally, I could wait no longer. As the blaze reached the edge of the former client's property, it became clear that Mac had screwed up and let the wildfire get out in front of him. I was sitting on the hood of the former client's Toyota Highlander watching the fire, smoking a cigar, and resting my AR-10 across my lap when the man and his wife rushed out of their home in their bedclothes. They were in a panic. While they were no longer my clients, I tried to calm them by pointing out that the fire stopped at their property line because he had cut all his trees down. It was just about then that we heard this horrible howling coming from inside the conflagration. "That's him, boys. Squatch is coming." I took position at the side of the couple's home and aimed at the swamp. Suddenly, this humanoid creature ran out of the swamp on two legs and into the couple's backyard. It was on fire and clearly in a panic. I opened fire on the biped. The burst and spray of red mist out of its head told me that my first shot was on the mark. I then flipped my rifle to binary and dumped the rest of my mag indiscriminately into the target. Unexpectedly, there was a big explosion, then another. Fire and flaming debris launched from the body. I, unfortunately, knew almost instantly what had happened. Holy shit, I said. I just shot Big Mac. Apparently, one or more of my bullets activated one of Mac's incendiary grenades. He was blown to bits, throwing flames, debris, and flesh and shrapnel everywhere. Or at least that is what I thought until I saw McMurder walk through the flames like an effing Terminator. He was a bit worse for the wear, but he was walking. I asked McMurder what had happened. Brushing the embers off his shirt and pants, he told me that the Squatch had turned on him and was rushing him. He popped off 3 rounds into its chest, which brought the beast to its knees, but not for long. As Mac approached the monster, it grabbed his vest, at which time Mac bent at an angle so that the vest would slide off his torso in a fluid motion. There was this wounded, nasty thing standing in front of him with a flak vest hanging with incendiaries dangling from its hand. Mac raised his rifle to finish the beast off when it bolted away to escape another 3-round burst into the chest and the fire. When it broke the tree line, I started my work and blew the thing to hell. We gathered our gear and we jumped in our trucks and we left the scene. At this point, I will merely report that we managed to successfully extract ourselves from this situation with the assurance from our former clients that not a word would be uttered about this incident or we would return and burn their house to the ground. I think they believed us. It's a good thing they did. We don't play games in this line of work. As I was speeding off from the scene, I was channel surfing on Sirius XM. I finally settled on Ozzy's Boneyard, which is playing the Iron Maiden's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and I cranked it up, and then I looked up to the road. I had to swerve to miss a giant creature traversing the road in front of me. It was another damn Bigfoot. It most likely was on the move due to Mac's forest fire. I stopped and backed up to where I saw it last. I wasn't surprised that it was gone. I knew there was no point of even going after one off a roadside sighting. They will belly crawl all over the forest like a spider and crawl down into a ditch or something to hide. You will walk all over the place around it and never know that it's there. I put my truck in gear and I drove home. I don't know if this creature was the same Bigfoot that was harassing my clients. In the grand scheme of things, though, it doesn't matter. They are here. Reported sightings just allow us to pinpoint locations in order to increase our chances of bagging one. With the fire and the couple sighting, this creature will move on. Therefore, this case is closed.